proposal. Spoiler alert, it was successful because I got the contract and started working there. And one of the people that I'm honored to be able to work with is Paul Wallet, who's also from Ojai. And Paul, why don't you just give us a little background about yourself?
My name's Paul Wallet, resident steward at Ojai Town. I was, my homeless journey about 5.5 or so years in the river bottom of Ventura. And I'm from, I grew up in Ojai, and did what most of us did. You know, we all got into construction stuff, and then, you know, it led into a lot of other things. But I eventually led me down to homelessness, and I eventually led me down to homelessness and stuff, and you know, down there I really tried to find out who I was and stuff. And when you're trying to do that, you lose a lot of things connected to you know, the outside world. I kind of did this all backwards too. I was 45 years old when this all occurred. I kind of just jumped out of life, and then you know, kind of found my bearings and stuff. Lost a lot of things, found a lot of things, and then from there I kind of got my stuff together and went to Tarzana, and with that I was in a sober living, and then COVID happened, and then I just come back to, like we always do, come back home to where we have to, you know, we think it's safe and everything, and did a couple things there, and then eventually I kind of heard that they were going to do something with the space at Ojai, the Ojai City Hall, and so I said, well, maybe I should get into that situation. So I did, and then it actually really became a really good thing, because it started because of the thing with the California voting for the homelessness stuff. They started to do a ownership of the situation of homelessness and stuff. So I just said I should be a part of it, and then that's when she came in, and then from there we're here.
Thanks. You can hold on to that. I think I have a booming voice, so I think can you all hear me in the back? And I thought we'd start off. One of the things we do with my organization, St. Francis Challenge, is we do a grounding activity when we have meetings, and so I thought I'd do that with all of you. And it has 4 parts to it. It's acknowledge, align, invite, and experience. And this is a nice tool to have when you start your meetings too, so you might get something out of this to take with you. So first of all, we just start off by acknowledging the challenges of our experience as well as the things that we're grateful for. And so when it comes to the challenges, we're dealing with a lot of people who are unsheltered and living in crisis. We're dealing with a lot of people who are in shelter and supported housing environments that feel like they're in poverty traps, and they feel like they're in substandard living, and they don't feel safe. So these are the challenges that we face, and my gratitudes for being here are that there are all these people that are gathered together to address this and who truly care and want to take this information and actually apply it. So I'm really grateful to all of you for being here and being part of this, and to Paul for coming with me and for me feeling like I'm part of the team in Ojai right now with the city as well as the residents of the sanctioned tent encampment where I work. The second part is alignment. So with all those challenges and acknowledging the gratitudes, the goal that I have, and I hope that a lot of you share with me, is that we align in service to a thriving humanity and planet. Can I feel an amen for that? Like, let's get ourselves to that thriving humanity and planet, and that starts from the micro all the way to the macro. So that starts with ourselves and, you know, our precious systems inside of us that keep us going, our immune system, our respiratory system. All of that has to be functioning in order for us to be in alignment in this larger way and do things outside of ourselves. And then we seek alignment interpersonally as part of teams of people working together, as part of communities, And nationally, we're coming together as a group and trying to address these things. So all seeking alignment in that way. The third part of grounding is to invite. And so I want you all to think about a word that you would like to invite into this room and to guide us in this work that we're doing here today and in this conference. And so the word that I'm going to invite in and the feeling is momentum. Paul?
Cooperation.
Okay, so we got momentum, cooperation, and creativity.
I was just going to go with
Create.
Comfort.
Comfort.
Sorry, I was distracted. My fault. I own it. So,
Communication.
there. I own it.
Communication.
Transparency.
Transparency. Innovation.
Sorry. Oops.
Curiosity. That's one of our values with St. Francis Challenges, to be humble and to be curious, to do what's right. Learning. And
Learning was the one that was the thought I had in mind, so I'll double that.
double that.
Hope.
Hope.
Healing.
Healing. And who do we have next?
Inspiration.
Inspiration. And keep going.
Openness.
What was that?
Openness.
Openness. And empowering. And keep going.
Generosity.
Generosity.
Both and.
Both and thinking.
Sharing.
Sharing.
Witness.
Witness.
I'll double down on curiosity.
Curiosity.
Listening.
Listening. Do we have that on there? And anybody else that joined us that wants to bring a word and a feeling into the room? Okay. So now this last part is experience. And so I usually like to put my hand on my heart, and you can close your eyes if you like, but I'm going to go ahead and read these words and just take a moment to experience what these things feel like, and we create them in that way. So what does it feel like to feel momentum? To feel cooperation, to create, to feel comfort. Just let that go through your body. What does it feel like when you feel comfortable? To feel communication and transparency, innovation, curiosity, learning. What does it feel like in your body when you feel hope? Just let that sit in your body for a moment. Experience that. And healing and inspiration. What does it feel like when you feel open? What does it feel like to truly listen and to be listened to? To feel empowered. What does generosity feel like in your body? What does it feel like when you explore both and thinking? And sharing and being witness. So thank you for bringing all of that into the room and experiencing that with us. So if you're going to take away some things from today, these are some of the high-level things that I hope you take away, is that I understand the importance of having housing, and I understand the concept behind housing first is that people really need to feel stabilized and have that that feeling of comfort and stability in order to make other changes in their life at times. But I started to feel in San Francisco in 2015 that I understood the concept of housing first, but there were over 3,500 people on the street living in crisis, and there wasn't enough housing being built. And so if there's not enough housing, and we're saying housing first, that's leaving thousands of people on the street without a place to go to the bathroom or to feel secure while they sleep at night. And so I tried to shift that discussion from a housing first to a stabilization first. So let's meet people where they're at. And I did work with large encampments in San Francisco of 35 people plus in Soma, in Mission Bay, in Mission, in the Tenderloin, figuring out like how can we work with this group of people that's here and meet needs instead of trying to move them all somewhere and then move them back eventually in the shuffle without having their needs met. So stabilization first is my rally cry for this work. Also, with the St. Francis Challenge, we work on creating the best places, and that means this: places of belonging. So everyone feeling on this deep sense that they belong, you know, to where you're at, to the human family, to the cosmos, because it might be that you don't belong to your own family because you're on the outs with them. It might be that you don't belong to a particular place because you're unsheltered and you have to move around. But I want people to feel that deep sense of you belong because you're here. You are part of the human family unequivocally. You know, you are part of life unequivocally. You might not have a place to sleep tonight, but we don't want people to doubt the fact that they belong in a deep sense. The E stands for essential needs, and so we need to create a place where people's essential needs are being cared for. And that means somewhere to sleep at night, somewhere to use the bathroom, somewhere to be in community and share your struggles and your victories with people. The S stands for shared agreements. So if you're gonna have a best place, it's gonna be a place where people know what the agreements are and there's accountability to following those agreements as a team. And then the T stands for teamwork, because that's a big part of having a really good place, is that you feel like you can rely on one another to get things done and to have accountability for those shared agreements. The other piece, as I mentioned before, is we need to create a benefits-friendly income so that people transitioning from a situation where they are completely dependent at some point can move from not dependent to totally independent, but create this third path of interdependence. And so the Resident Steward Model, the thought is that you're here, you have Medi-Cal, you have a place to live, we're not gonna jeopardize that. You might have Social Security, disability, so you can only earn $200 a month extra in cash, right? The Resident Steward Model makes it so that you can either have the income you receive through a taxable stipend, or you can choose a non-taxed wellness spending account. So that means that you could, HUD has 5 different categories of what they consider essential needs. And that's housing, clothing, transportation, food, and wellness, like medicine. So those are 5. We also include pet care, we include like a general type of wellness, and we include vocational. So those are all things you can get reimbursed for so that you're not threatening your benefits with getting income. So we'll go into that later. Another really key overview piece to this is that we want to involve the residents of shelters, of villages, of supported housing in doing the on-site operations and supporting co-living and community integration. So how many of you have actually lived in an encampment on the street, like spent time living in an encampment? How many people have spent time living in a shelter and in a supported housing environment? So everyone here knows, and you might be these people, there are always the people that help, right? They're the people that pick up the trash when they don't have to, or they help their neighbor with something when it's not needed, just because it's happening. And we want this model of the Resident Steward Model, it's really trying to amplify what already exists in these places. That there are the people that help, and we want to figure out how do we support and amplify the people who are helping and create some structure for that so that it can support the whole on-site operations as well as the community. And then another piece that we work on is having it's this mix, right, of having accountability with having a safe place and having appropriate exits. And so we'll get into this a little bit, but you might have experienced this if you've lived in or worked in one of these environments, that there's a desire not to exit people from the street sometimes, even when they do really harmful things to someone else or threaten someone else. It's not that they're using drugs, sometimes it's that their conduct when they use drugs, they start to spin out and affect other people. And so how do you create accountability in a sanctioned encampment or supported housing, and you have people follow those agreements, but then there's a safe exit or a time out or a place for people to go and get that care where they're not being exited to the street or jail. That's something that we really work on in this model right now at Ojai Town. So just to give you a little background, St. Francis Challenge, like I said, we started in 2015, and the focus was on these big encampments that were popping up, because that was a pretty relatively new thing in 2015 to have larger encampments and have people be more emboldened to put tents up. And so what I saw happening in San Francisco, I did some of the data research, and so did a couple other advocacy orgs, and we found that over $50 million a year was going to the whack-a-mole, sweeps, disrupt, and move approach, and that was getting us terrible outcomes. And so what I was proposing at that time was, why don't we try something different and actually work with each encampment or find a place where they could go and create a village environment so there would be structure. And I started doing this work with large encampments. The first time that I started doing it was actually, I got invited by a police officer who had been working with this tent encampment right by Caltrains on 7th Street in San Francisco. And she called me, and she had heard that my organization was bringing out porta potties and testing out overnight porta potty use for different encampments. And she said, there's a gentleman here who was requesting a porta potty. I thought that was so civilized of a cop to actually say that to me, a gentleman requesting a porta potty. So that night I went out to that site and I met the person who had requested. I said, I heard there's a guy named John here who's interested in having a porta potty. And that's really when this Resident Steward Model began in earnest, because I started to think about, okay, if I have a porta potty here and it gets vandalized, then I'm on the hook for $1,500 above and beyond the cost of this thing. How is it we can create incentives so that the people who are using the porta potty get incentives if after a month it's still here and it's still functioning and people are looking out after it? So that was how that work started. Then I started to look at the 311 calls that were coming in and having complaints from the neighbors around there and saying, okay, we got a complaint that at 2 in the morning someone's banging on something metal. So it's like, who's banging on something metal? And then, oh, this Richie's doing that. He's doing this sort of building at night. Well, Richie, this is disrupting the neighborhood. You know, so we started to have these shared agreements. Let's not make noise, let's not be, and we started to work with the neighbors and with the Department of Public Works, because they were coming and just trying to sweep all the trash. It's like, well, what if you told us what days you were coming and the people who live here could work with you and have all the trash ready? And that's what we did, and we made their job easier. So it was all about, how do we work together, not us versus them, but actually have neighbors and the Department of Public Works and these residents come together to do this kind of teamwork to address the needs. And so let's fast forward. In San Francisco, it was a fight to get the administration to accept that we could do interim housing and interim crisis support kind of villages. Because at that time, housing first was kind of all the rage. And so they were saying, well, you're going to be wasting money. It's going to be a distraction if you try to do this stabilizing work. And I said, au contraire, mon frere, you do not, it is not ever a distraction to provide someone a toilet. And it is not ever a distraction to address the needs of people who are living in crisis. And the longer that we have people wait out on the streets, the more trauma they're experiencing, right? Like even 1 or 2 days living outside affects you. And then months and months and months of that really affects you. And so we need to have this approach, even though we want to get to that righteous end goal of getting people into housing, we need these interim steps of stabilization. But it wasn't until, and some of my projects got blocked, we had a lot of support, we had Burning Man headquarters on our side, we had big architecture firms that were wanting to support us. But it got blocked and blocked and blocked. And then in COVID, that really opened things up, right, for a lot of cities to experiment with different programs with hotels and also with cabin villages and things of that nature. So San Francisco started to do that work. But it was a lot of money, and I felt like they were missing a key piece. And the key piece was, instead of hiring all these people to be security and have this top-down approach, what they were missing was this teamwork approach to work with the people who were on site and create that structure and even give some paid opportunities to some of those folks instead of having it be, we just need to hire all these people to manage these people who are here. Does that resonate with you guys? Like, that's the missing piece. And so that's where the Resident Steward Model comes from. I ended up going to New Mexico for 4 years. I left in the middle of COVID, and I worked with the city of Santa Fe on creating a report on different interventions that they could do for homelessness, for unsheltered, and they actually have a cabin village there now. And that information is all on our website, so I'll take you to our website in a little bit. So all of this information you could access later if you were interested. So that brings us to the city of Ojai, and the city of Ojai did something really incredible. Instead of deciding that they were going to break up this encampment of people that had formed at the City Hall campus, which is like altogether like an 8-acre campus in Ojai, which is a really sweet little town that's like kind of in between Santa Barbara and LA and near Ventura. It's a small town, it's a pretty wealthy town, and all these people during COVID were going onto the City Hall campus, which is by a creek bed, and they started to camp there. And at that time, remember, Martin versus Boise was still in effect, and so a lot of cities were afraid with their police departments to break up sites if they didn't have a shelter alternative for people to go to. And so the city of Ojai, instead of breaking up this encampment on City Hall, they actually did something incredible. And I have so much gratitude. Even though it's challenging working with a local government, I have so much gratitude for the city of Ojai, because they said, we're going to take this on. So there were about like 36 or so people spread out on the City Hall campus camping. And in October of last year, so a year ago, they hired a homeless service coordinator named Rick, and they hired him to create a space on the campus with these platforms and wilderness tents so it would be more structured. And that got set up. And then because the city had done this thing, which was very atypical, instead of breaking it up, they were supporting people and supporting stabilization. Do you know the term ERF grant in the state of California? So encampment resolution funding. The state awarded $12.7 million to the city of Ojai to take this encampment that they had stabilized and transition it into permanent supportive housing. So some of you have heard of the organization Dignity Moves. Dignity Moves, they're a sister organization of ours, and they started doing a cabin village in San Francisco, and now they're doing them all over the state. And so the city of Ojai said, okay, you guys do this, you develop these cabin villages, we're gonna work with you as the nonprofit developer. And that was in April of this year. In May, someone at Dignity Moves was talking to the city manager of the city of Ojai and said, we need more structure here. Because it was kind of the Wild West in this encampment, because they had one homeless service coordinator for this sanctioned encampment of 35 to 40 people. And that person would be there from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. Well, guess what happens at 4 p.m.? It becomes the Wild West, right? So in May, I started talking with the city manager, and in June, I gave this presentation about how we could try out the Resident Steward Model there and create a best place, you know, belonging, essential needs, shared agreement, and teamwork. And Paul has experienced all these different iterations of being unsheltered and now sheltered in Ojai and Ventura County. And I thought maybe you could speak a little bit about what things were like prior to me coming on board in July and us getting security. So you experienced living in the river bottoms of Ventura, and then what brought you to City Hall, to that encampment, and how did you see things change when they brought on the homeless service coordinator?
Well, she's right when she says it was the Wild West at the spot. I mean, they were fighting and screaming and yelling, and at 4:30, that's when it would all start. I think it's funny too, because I was used to it being down in the river bottom. I mean, that was a normal day. PTSD, like you wouldn't believe. What I was going to say is, it was nice when when they, you know, I actually understood that they were doing that, also going to deal with the actual issue of the homeless, and so that's why I made my way over to that location. Rick coming in, I think was just going off it by every day, and the resources coordinator, they got a lot of stuff put together, but it still needed more structure that I was thinking about, and they used to call me Deputy No Badge when I was there. And it wasn't, and everybody kept thinking I was trying to be the boss, which I wasn't. I was just saying, if we act accordingly, we will be treated accordingly. And you know, though whatever's happened to all of us in the past, we're here now to make it a better place, and we have the same responsibility as we want, you know, them to have, you know. But it's not so much a problem of an issue of a situation. What else was?
That was great.
Yeah.
So, okay, so this is the presentation I gave to the City Council on June 11th. So this is the case for a lot of tent encampments, whether they're sanctioned or not. There's a need for more on-site services to support co-living, belonging, essential needs and shared agreements, teamwork, personal empowerment, and pathways to housing for the people who are living in encampments. You need someone to come on site and say, what are the needs of this place? You need more organizing support to address the community concerns, because the neighbors around, you know, had their pitchforks and they were saying, why is it that City Hall is allowing all these people to be on our property and our idyllic little community is being impacted by this? Once again, amazing for City Hall to actually say, yes, in my backyard, literally on their campus, and transform a parking lot into a sanctioned encampment. That is a huge step forward. But there needed to be more involvement with the community to make them feel like they were part of it. And there needed to be, like I said, more opportunities for income and personal empowerment for the Ojai residents exiting homelessness without jeopardizing their benefits. So that was all things that I wanted to bring in with this model. The lead resident steward is me in this case. So my proposal was, I'm going to move to Ojai. I have a little trailer that I call Sam the Clam, my clamshell trailer. and I'm gonna live on site, and I'm gonna operate this program, and I'm gonna build a team, and I'm gonna do all this work. And my job there is to do these assessments and create this team environment, not just with the residents that are living there, but with the security team, with the neighbors, with the city hall staff, etc. And then a big part of this is recruiting and training and supervising the residents who will become resident stewards to provide some of these on-site operations. These are the resident steward values, and I recommend if you have any kind of program that you're doing to be really values first and really be clear about what your values are, and also view your values as a living document because things can change. Because these 10 are pretty much what we had in the beginning, but some of these have changed and I updated them in this slide presentation because they were so important. So first of all, you belong, your needs matter, be a team player. Tried and true. But this is something that anyone who's ever worked in a shelter or an encampment environment, I think these have been really helpful to add these values. If your behavior impacts the community, it becomes a community issue. So there's this, like, I remember one person got really upset and started screaming at me and another resident there. And then later on, I was talking to people about it and we were unpacking it. You know, like, how did that feel? Because that was re-traumatizing to have this person spiral out, most likely induced by meth, but lots of trauma in this person's past, acting out. And so he found out that I had been talking about it with people, and he said, I don't think that's right that you're talking about these issues with other people. And I said, well, then that's terrorism. Because if you can terrorize us with your behaviors and then we aren't allowed to talk through it, that isn't fair. When you started to scream in public, it became a community issue. And now it's everybody's issue. It's not just your personal thing that you get to decide when you want to work on these things. If you're bringing something into the community, if you're having a domestic fight with your girlfriend or boyfriend and you live in a tent, guess what? It's the whole community's issue because there are not walls.
That part right there.
And you're hearing it all. And so all of a sudden what's happening between this couple is now a community issue. What they do with their dog or don't do with their dog is a community issue. So that's something that I keep bringing up to folks, is that if it affects the community, it's the community's right to address it. Also, this is a huge important one. If you didn't see it or hear it yourself, take it with a boulder of salt, not a grain of salt, but a boulder. Because if I believed everything everybody told me, everybody would be under suspicion and it would be a terrible environment, right? Because everybody's pointing fingers at each other all the time. And that's one of the challenges of this work, is that if I don't see it personally as the lead resident steward or the security team doesn't see it, it's hard to enforce something around that. You know, so if someone says, I saw someone go into my tent even, if I didn't see it or the security team didn't see it, we're going to be alert to it, but it's hard to act on those things unless we have 100% knowledge. And people plant things in their tents sometimes and say, or in someone else's tent, say, look, this person stole this from me. It gets really twisted and involved, right? So that's a challenging one. People sometimes want me to act as a leader and say, do something about this, but it can be challenging to do that if I didn't see it myself. Stand up for truth, safety, fairness for everyone. Yes, everyone, even the people you don't like. So if they're right about something, like there was someone who was acting up and being aggressive, but he also told me some other things about how he felt things should be different there. And I said, you know, I don't like the way that you're presenting this to me, but you do have a point about this. You know, always find the kernel of truth and the thing that you can work with, because we're solution oriented. And so we're always going to figure out, you know, even if someone's being problematic, they still might have a point on something. There's no shame in our game. Shine a light with grace. And so our goal isn't to shame anyone about their behaviors. It's just to point out the behaviors that are happening that are harmful and to try to address them, right? This one's been very helpful. I say this to people a lot of times, like, I don't have to like you. There are people that I work with, that Paul and I live with, we don't have to like them, but we love them. And that means that we know as their neighbor they need a place to belong and we care about their needs and we'll work together as a team. But sometimes people are really unlikable. It took me a long time to figure that out because, you know, Jesus says that too, you know, love your enemy. And it's like, what is that all about? But really what that comes down to, there you go. The way you love your enemy is you love them. You don't have to like them, right? And you love that they belong and they're part of the human family and they have needs. But we don't have to be liking everyone. And that's actually very liberating. That was very liberating for me to figure that out. Be humble and be curious to do what's right. So that goes from me to Paul to everyone there. Are we doing this the right way? Always take that step back and have reflection on that because we want to do right. We don't want to be right. That's more important for me to do right, not to be right. Seeking win-win solutions and following shared agreements. So I'm more of a spirit of the law kind of person. You know, I care that the spirit of the law is enforced. Some people are more letter of the law. And I think that's kind of a difference between the first homeless service coordinator that was there. He was there and we overlapped for about a month and he was there for about a year. And I think his approach was more to kind of keep things at an arm's distance and not get too involved and just be letter of the law. Whereas I get really involved and I care about the spirit of it. So if the goal is to keep everyone safe and you're doing something, I'm gonna say, well, this might be a little outside of how we normally do it, but this is in the spirit of what our agreements are.
So what you're kind of saying, one is more self-righteous and one is really coming from a space of community, but also
yeah,
grace.
Nuance.
Yeah.
Having nuance because everyone's different. And me and Paul differ about this a lot because he says, by the book, you should always, he says we should, you know, it should just be black and white, some of these rules. And if I did it that way, a lot of people would have been exited from the program already. And so it's that balance of how do we keep people here and have them working the agreements and give a little bit of grace and space, but ultimately, if they're threatening people and it's a bad scene, they might need to go. Did you want to say a little bit about
Well, I
that?
would say about the balance on that is, what we differ is, I was telling her today that as long as the solution doesn't be shadowed by the problem, you know, that was the whole thing. And at the core, if at its core, you have just a automated, you know, hierarchy of rules that they basically have to follow, then you can take everything as it comes. It just alleviates that necessity to have all the variables to deal with this person and this other person has this many more variables to deal with, and it gets exhausting, and then you don't have time to pay attention to what's really important. So, and then you start being blameful and you're tired, and then people start getting mad at you because you're not helping them as much. And
And that, like, for instance, there's a person who has a severe hoarding issue. And so I'm trying to work with that person to figure out some carve-outs, like, okay, I'm going to try to get you an extra storage unit, or I'm going to try to get you extra storage tubs and work with you on that way. And then other people will say, well, can I have extra storage tubs? It's like, and the question is, well, do you have a diagnosed hoarding issue? No? Okay, well, this person does. So we're willing to have nuance to deal with the issues that are presenting. This is just a bit about stfrancischallenge.org, and that's where you can go, by the way, if you wanted to take a moment on your phone to look up stfrancischallenge.org and have it in there. It's all spelled out, SAINT, Francis Challenge. And this is just, like I said, the presentation that I gave to the City Hall. That's me getting interviewed in front of a porta potty we brought to Division Street, because I guess that's news, like people having toilets is news sometimes, you know. And these are the things that I said I would do at Ojai Tent Town. Baseline interviews with the residents with incentives, meetings with key stakeholders and community, creating village shared agreements and developing a name, and then selecting and onboarding 5 or more resident stewards. And so just to get into that a little bit, so one of the first things I did when I was on site, and this is all open source stuff too, by the way, if you were interested in trying to implement something like this, I have these interview instruments, I have surveys that I've done with the community, and I'm willing to share that all with everyone. None of it's proprietary.
Good, because I'm sitting here trying to get the
Yeah.
glare out of the way.
Yeah. So I have on SurveyMonkey is what we use to do the interview instruments with people. And Paul and I did an interview, and maybe we can talk a little bit, Paul. So I got there, I pulled in with my trailer. I think I was there for about 4 days. Paul had seen this presentation the month before in June. I arrived on July 1st, and we started talking, and I think I won him over, but he was really skeptical at first, and what got him on my side is because he realized I was on your side, and one of the first things we talked about was how do we get a shower here? So maybe you can talk a little bit about what it felt like to have someone come in with this model, and you're like, well, we're already here, why do we need this, or what are you all about?
Well, when I met her,
Do you want to use the mic?
oh yeah, when I met her, it was more so, okay, what are they gonna promise and not come up with? That's what everybody's used to, which is, I'd rather have somebody to tell me to shut up than to walk away and say, later, not, So, and it's not so much, it's not so much what I was needing, but I'm under the understanding, be a person of your word, that's just basic with anything, a lot of them, they promise the pie in the sky, and all the funding comes in, and then everybody seems to clamor to get what they want, and then, now I have to take the responsibility of doing that. And that's what I did find out with you, that when I put 20 questions, and I was, and I'm not really that connected emotionally to that kind of interaction, because it's just it would be just another interaction with somebody that's not going to bring to the table what they promised. But I actually was telling her too that I realized how connected I was to that process, and the way I am is too is if somebody is a person of their word, I'm a soldier for them. I expect people to expect that from me, and I expect that for people, and that's how solutions are accomplished. And it was, like I said, I gave her, up and down and make sure that, and then she was making these promises, and then she actually came up and said, well, let's get that, the materials for making the shower. Boom, 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 and it was done. And that from that forward, there's different things that we disagree on and stuff, but for the most part, the solution is being accomplished, bit by bit by bit, and that's a good thing, I think so.
And to build off of that, so we talked about something, and then I let people know, okay, we do these hour-long, like 30-minute to an hour-long resident steward interviews, and I'm going to go over some of these questions that I asked people. And we gave a $20 gift certificate for the local market for people to participate. And out of the current amount, there's 34 people there. 30 people have done resident steward interviews with me. And it's just a way for me to get to know them and get to understand what the needs are, and then try to start matching those needs and desires with actual activities and with tasks and things of that nature. So the first 10 to 15 questions that we ask are, they're on a Likert scale. So like on a scale of 1 to 5, I'm going to say a statement and you tell me how you feel about it. So the first question is, I feel safe living here. And then people say, 3 or a 4, and then I had open-ended information. So I have 15 of those questions, including I feel like my needs are being met living here, I feel like I'm part of a community, I have access to support services to find permanent housing. So I'm just trying to understand where people feel like what their needs are, how they're feeling. And then this information is really useful because now I have this aggregate data of 30 different interviews. And so I'm able to share that with the community at large and with the city and with the residents there. Like, this is the overall vibe of how it feels to be here. And then after those 15 open-ended questions and that scale, the questions are about, like, what's your relationship to Ojai? Were you born here? What brought you here? When was the last time you were living indoors? Is there somewhere else besides Ojai you'd like to be living? So that all information gets gathered. And one of the things that's often lobbed against the residents of Ojai Tent Town is that they're not from here. And because the city sanctioned an encampment, it brought all these people here. Well, no, that isn't accurate, because aside from just there's a couple people who have been in Ojai just for a couple years and have been at the tent town the majority of that time. But then there's a few others that are deeply connected to Ventura County, which is the county that Ojai is in. And then the vast majority have deep, deep ties, going back 70 years, 50 years. Another thing from these interviews that's really helpful to tell the community is, like, the median age is older at these places, and so we have people in their 70s, 60s, and 50s, and that's the majority. We have one person in their 30s, but it skews older, and that's because Ojai, like many places, has the Airbnb-ification of Ojai, and all of the available rentals are no longer available and affordable to people. So it's older people that are getting priced out of their homes, and it's grandmas that are living in these tents. And I think that affects people when they know that that's the reality. I also ask people, like, what are your benefits that you're receiving? And that's to help me understand what kind of access services do we need here? Who do we need to get here from the county to support people? And then I go through all the agreements that we had. That was a big part of what I did at Ojai Tent Town, is that there were a list of about 15 rules that the campers were supposed to abide by. But remember, at 4:00 p.m., those rules went out the window and it was the Wild West again. And so the thought was, how do we actually create these agreements with input from the residents so that the residents feel safe here, they feel like these rules are reasonable and they're going to follow them. And so I went through those with everyone, and they gave me their feedback on that. And the agreements that we have for Ojai Tent Town are also a living document, because those things change as well. Sometimes you need to make adjustments to them, because there might be some loophole that people are exploiting or whatnot, and you want to, like, really drill in and get to the heart of the matter. So that's some of the questions we had. It was just called, at the time, it was called the City Hall Tent Encampment. And so I said, let's give it a name. And when I first got there, someone had painted a rock, Punky had painted a rock, and it said Ojai Tent Town, and she put it in front of my trailer. And so I started asking people in the interviews, like, what about Ojai Tent Town? So now that's what the city calls it too. It's officially called Ojai Tent Town, which feels a lot better than the sanctioned encampment at City Hall, right? Like, it's nicer to say you live in a town. And then I asked people, like, what do you need or need more of? A safe place to sleep, privacy. So I was getting a sense of, like, do people feel safe here? Do they feel like they need more privacy? And the things that people really wanted, a refrigerator. Guess what? We got a refrigerator. Woo-hoo! A shower. Paul helped build the shower outside of my trailer because there was a little shower unit on the outside of it, and so he built out the shower system that goes there. People wanted more meals at night, so I organized a meal train, and so we have meals coming in from the community. So all the things that I was asking in that first month were really important to build out, and then we can see, was it successful?
And I think it's funny too, because as they called me Deputy No Badge, I transitioned into the concierge. And it's funny because people would, when I go around, getting, asking, do you have any trash in your tents, and running around doing that, people were like making orders for well, when is this? When is the the yoga start, we had a yoga thing there for a while. When does this start, when does it end? And then, you know, like I was hey, this is not working or this. And I plugged in 8 heaters into the solar, can't use it, but I want to, I'm cold. Blankets, you know, and it was just funny that I always made it.
So did that happen around the same time that it transitioned to tent town as opposed to the other pathology?
Yeah.
See, so there you go.
And I let people know that this isn't your staff working for you.
That part.
This is a team that's working together. And to be a resident steward, people, if they want to, like I said, they can, there's 4 people now that get $1,000 a month. That's a taxable stipend, or they get reimbursements. So like Paul, like he'll give me a list on Amazon of clothing or vocational things that like help him with his work or with organizing or storage. But he's also gotten some checks. But people are signing up with a 1099, so they give me a W-9 and their ID. I send that into my fiscal sponsor and start up the ability for them to get paychecks, or they can get those reimbursements. But it's an interesting thing because it's not a job per se. You're still an independent contractor and it's voluntary. And I also do the same thing. I get a $1,000 a month stipend, and I'm on a 1099. My organization is all volunteers, and I live that lifestyle as well. But
to the government, you're an employee. That's how they feel about it, and that's the pissy offy part about it.
Well, I'm able to be in that little gray zone right now, and I'm trying to build it out. I'm trying to get the Governor Newsom, to be interested in this kind of model, because I feel like it's an elegant hack to the system, because we are talking about a non-taxed wellness spending account, and we are talking about a taxable stipend. I feel like this is something that there's room to shift a little bit, but you're right, we're not quite there.
But we're actually doing that in LA. We've kind of built a small national cohort in regards to people who are being 1099 to death, and we call it Social Security Benefits Cliff. But so I'm going to give you my card, because we're actually having those conversations.
Oh, good.
We've gone on the federal level to DC. Now, as far as getting Newsom's here, I do have a friend that works for Newsom, but it's funny how people don't really. Anyway, keep on with your conversation.
Let me get that. But that's the reason why we're here, right? Is to make these kind of connections.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy that you mentioned that. So that was just a little aside about the payment thing, and then people thinking, well, doesn't Paul work for me? It's like, no. This is a group that is supporting the community, but these are not your personal servants. You know?
One thing that was nice about it, that it was just kind of a little odd thing, that when a little bit of structure came in, those same people that called me deputy nomad, they actually were kinder when the same things that they would say, you're not in control of nothing, but you know, hey, go deal with this guy or deal with this thing. They actually were, it was very odd. They kind of, hey Paul, you know, hey, if you have time or whatever, because they knew I was doing the work, they gave me that respect, and since they were given hope for things, a little bit of structure, they started treating the people around them accordingly, and that was nice. That was a nice little side effect of you coming into it.
And you know, there are about 34 people there right now. There's a core team right now of about 5 people that really show up. Paul is one of them, Johnny, Rosemary. Something that I saw, 2 anecdotes, you know, that are really powerful, or somebody came back from a recovery program and they were pretty depressed. But this person is a doer, and they were always just helping out. She is now the person who's my go-to, you know, for cleaning the coffee room and doing like a daily trash round, and it just makes me so happy when I see her with those trash bags walking around, and I just feel like we're on the same team. But I've seen a huge difference in her since she started doing this and getting that. You can do up to 15 hours a week, and that ends up being like $16 credit for each hour, and that can be up to $1,000 a month, like I was saying. So we have about 4 people that are doing that, and I've seen a huge change in that. There was someone who got kind of caught up in a weird cycle and ended up going to a mental institution and almost getting like lobotomized through having Halidol, like, or some kind of drug. And I didn't know him before. I didn't know him before that happened. I only knew him after. And when I first got there, people would say, I'm not going to say his name, but they would say, oh, he's so different, and he's like had a lobotomy. And I'd be like, he's right there. You're talking about this man, and he's right there. And then he'd say, I don't mind. I actually think I kind of was lobotomized. But then I noticed that he was always in the coffee room. And then we needed to fill up the water jugs. And I was like, hey, do you want to be the guy that fills up the water jugs? And then he started to be really attentive when we would have people come to drop off donations. And so now this guy is working 10 hours a week supporting, and he's one of my key people. And I've seen a huge change in him. There's another woman who stepped up, Rosemary, and it was her dream, you know, because she's been homeless over the years. Her kids had to experience that off and on growing up. Her daughter is in college now, and it was her dream to buy her daughter a car. With the Resident Steward money, I was able to save all that up and put $2,500 down for a car for her. Instead of her getting that paycheck, she just got to save it up, and then now she's using her money to pay for her daughter's car insurance every month. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, like, she kind of got out of the habit of being in a more structured role and having an income. So how does it feel to have that opportunity again?
Oh, it's actually a necessity, I think, for the transition of things. Like I said, I did this backwards. I was a contractor and everything, and guys working for me, and it's almost like a need. If I don't have that, if I don't have the structure, I just kind of float around. I need that, and I think a lot of people need that also. As the side effect of putting a little bit of structure to something, you can get a lot out of it. And I think it's more so that you're having people participate in the process other than being dictated to. This is what you're going to do, this is what you're going to do. I mean, and it's not, we're not doing anything that's not anybody else is being requested of. You know, it's just being part of, you know, instead of being all of the parts. So.
One thing that I noticed is that, okay, if you have an unsanctioned encampment and you want to stabilize it, and you still need to build tents and you still need to do some things that are pretty serious about responding to mental health crisis, or having people who, like, we had a couple people who I had to work really hard to exit from the program because they needed more nursing care than we could provide, and that was really challenging. But one of the things that always gets to me is just how powerful it is to have a task that you complete with other people, and how that really affects your whole feeling about a group of people if you work together on a goal together and accomplish something. And it seems like a lot of chaos sometimes, but like I remember this one day somebody had it's like, oh, this person has lice. And everybody just jumped into action. Someone said, I'm gonna, set up a shower for him. I'm gonna go get him new clothes from the donation room. Ames, can you go to Rite Aid and get a lice kit? We're gonna set up his tent so that he comes back to a clean tent and doesn't recontaminate it. Like, that's powerful stuff when everybody works together on something like that. But what I've noticed is that if you're in stabilization mode, it's like people like Paul who have construction and background and also crisis response kind of instincts. Everybody's busy, right? And so everybody's doing the stuff to get things done. And then once everything stabilizes, and there are people who weren't following the agreements and putting others at risk, and so they got exited from the program. I call them like the biggest chaos agents, that are causing the most problems. So like, let's say you have agreements that you establish. At month 2, you finally get some of the chaos agents out. Everybody there is dealing with trauma. Everybody there is like, one incident away from unraveling a little bit necessarily. So if you get the chaos agents out and you do the brunt of the work, then all of a sudden people are kind of spinning. And Paul, you mentioned this where you're like, it was almost too quiet at night. I couldn't sleep because it was almost too quiet, you know, and you go through these different stages when you're stabilizing a place. And so I'll just say one more word and then I want you to reflect on it a little bit, that I feel like the first stages are, okay, you get your team that's gonna respond to the crises and stabilize and do the things that need to be done. And then you need to figure out some kind of enterprise together where you're making something or doing something. Because if you're just waiting to respond to the issues, then everybody's wheels start to turn and it starts to get weird. Like, that's why one of my goals is that we have a pallet industry, like where we're taking pallets and we're creating furniture out of it, or doing something that taps into the skills of people. Because after you stabilize, you want to actually be working on this next level of doing something together. And maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, well, I was going to say about the carnival that starts at 4 o'clock. Usually it didn't start till about 12 o'clock at night. And it was to the point people were mowing the lawn and stuff, weird stuff like that. But after, it was probably, what, a couple months. And then it was, I remember waking up out of sleep in my tent. It was so quiet, it was deafening, it was so loud, and because nobody was screaming and yelling, and to the point that people that are across the way in the houses would yell to the people, "All right, guys, it's time to go to sleep." Oh my God. Yeah, it's chaos. Though, and a lot of us, I'm very comfortable with the chaos, which it makes me kind of nervous and have anxiety when there's not things going on like that. But that's
real.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of people experience that. If you like even if you grow up in a toxic family, you know, you're like always waiting for the other shoe to drop. If it's quiet, if things are feeling okay, so that's PTSD. You know, and a lot of people are experiencing it.
And that's why that was so strong to me, and I think it's very, out of anything, is when something is proposed to do it, you know, people that have all this loss, whatever, we deal with loss, you're going to go to jail, okay, no problem, that's good. You're going to lose this, you're going to get punished for that, okay, no problems. But on the other side of that, that promise, it might be nothing promise, but it's everything, because you're having people be vulnerable for just a little bit more. And if that just a little bit, if you shine through on that promise, then they're willing to go and everybody come together to clean, you know, somebody that's in need without going, what am I going to get from this? What am I going to get from this?
And we just had a guy who needed to take, we called it the space tent because we're like, we're going to put you in the space tent because you need space right now because you're affecting people. So we put him kind of off to the side. And then he likes to do things with watering and plants. And he disrupted the water hose situation so that it was leaking, and he was acting so entitled about it and saying like, no one's gonna tell me what to do and I'm gonna do this with the water. And it's like, dude, we're on team water here. And so I asked, like, we're kind of at odds, me and this person right now because of some of the things he's done. But I asked my team, you know, Paul and Johnny and Jesse, I said, could you talk to this guy a little bit and get him to see that it's not about that we want to take the water away, but the water might be taken away from us as a privilege from the city if we're wasting it. So get him to see that we're on the same team. And that's really helpful for me, who's like the leader or the manager of the campsite right now, is that I have my team and they can come in and do that kind of work with people on the level. And there's a couple people in the community who are volunteers that I call community stewards, and some of them get stipends too. And they're also doing that. Like when I'm having a challenge with someone, like the person who's having hoarding issues, she was really upset with me because I was holding her accountable. But then we had a community steward come in to do the inspections with her because she's like, you're not coming into my tent to check. It's like, okay, well, what about Rachel? You know, and so having that community steward piece of this is really powerful too. I know we're almost out of time, so I just wanted to see what other things that I had put up here. Let's see. Oh, challenges. Let's just end with some challenges here. So one of the big things that I'm dealing with right now is figuring out how do we get the county involved so that we have more options when people aren't a good fit for this level of autonomy and security. Some people are having full-blown mental health challenges and unravelings, or they're not able to handle the meth. Like, a lot of people there do use meth, and for us it's not about whether you use, it's your conduct. And there are people that take it and then have these spirals. And the thing is that we're trying to uphold these agreements as a group, but then we know that we're the catch-all for the whole city. So if we say that people have to leave because they're not following the agreements, oftentimes they have to exit to the street or to jail. And so right now we're trying to work on figuring out, we need a bunch of these kinds of spaces. So there's like the Ojai tent town sanctioned encampment, but there needs to be another space where we can say, okay, if they're not able to handle themselves there, it's not that we don't want them back eventually, because maybe they just spun out and they need to go get some services and deal with their stuff and come back. But that is one of our biggest challenges. How many people have dealt with that challenge? Like, they can't stay with you, but you don't want them to go to the street. And that hurts my heart. And that's why sometimes we have these differences of opinion about what should happen, because I take it really seriously that we're the last opportunity for a lot of people.
Have you partnered with rehabs at all to have like a person you can call like in those situations?
There's, in Ventura County, there's a program that the person that connects people to those services. So I've made 10 referrals like in the last 2 months. Once I found out I could make referrals to them, it's like, let's get them on board. Yeah.
Well, that's another thing too about the responsibility of their job function. A lot of them, they like a paycheck, but they don't, when they're passed along. And then when somebody that's been ejected or is trying to be ejected for a violent act, it puts you and everybody else in that space that you don't want to be in. And then now everybody goes, well, wait a minute, they've done this, and I towed the line. Well, I'm not going to toe the line no more. And it just messes the line of things. Because we're, like I said, we're used to the negative or the chaos. To a point, like the old West after, we just say river bottom rules, and it's not the way it is, but it works down in that area because it's an absolute. That's maybe why I'm the way I am. Is you have to follow the rules. You have to put work in if you want to get a reward out. That's my whole premise.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about having a crisis management team and respite care?
Yeah.
Respite care would be another site that they go to for temporarily. They could be there from 30 days to 6 months, and then they can return back. And if they are not successful, they go back. They get 2 more chances. Then you move them out to another place that will be able to deal with their mental health or substance abuse or whatever.
That's exactly right.
And then respite care will pay for itself because you can use Medicaid dollars.
What city or county are you in?
I'm from Delaware.
Okay, and so is that available to you where you
No,
are?
but I'm making
You're
it
working on
available.
it? Okay, so
And in a
we're
way,
sisters in different cities working on the
right,
same thing.
and the way I can get in, I'm a nurse, so I'm like, oh, I need this medical, and we need Medicaid, we need respite care, and they agreed with me. Now I have to set it up to make sure it works and doesn't fail. But the crisis management, and you can use nursing schools, you can use other healthcare facilities to come in to do that because they have to have a internship, and so that's where you're in your respite care. You get the dollars, and they pay for you to be a site, so you get more money coming in where you can use for different things.
We're working on that exact thing because we want someone who is licensed on site so they can see for themselves the level of care that some of these residents need. Because I feel like sometimes my role is at odds with the case manager's role, because the case manager has the resident come visit them at their site for what, a half hour at most. and they hear the complaints from the resident, and then they try to appease the resident. Now, we live with the resident, and we see what kind of abuse they're putting other people through. And so when we try to talk to the case manager, they don't want to hear the realities of what we're dealing with. That's why we need someone on site who has that licensure that could say, this person needs a different level of care right now. Because we have one guy who, he's, like we say, we should get him a radio station, right? You know, because he should be a 24-hour DJ, because that's what he's doing in his tent all day, complaining about many things, and it gets really, really dark, and it gets loud. And I say to the city manager, the whole city should be patting us on the back and saying, thanks for doing a solid for the city, because you're working with this fellow that would otherwise be in the park, you know, and we're dealing with the challenges of his needs and trying to figure out the solution of where can he go, because we care about him. We don't want him on the street, but he shouldn't be in this level of a community, because then it traumatizes everybody else there. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Once again, stfrancischallenge.org is, this is the budget that I put together, and this is all on our website too. So stfrancischallenge.org, that's my dog, my faithful canine assistant, Rio G. Were there any other questions before we left as a group? Because I know we're running out of time. Yeah.
There's a comment I'd like to offer, and that is that in my area, I was working with state communities that have done affordable housing, and one of them has done a co-op model of affordable housing. The residents absolutely loved it. Unfortunately, the service agency that they were working with decided last year to disband the model. But it worked really well. People participated in the management, in the maintenance, and people got a real sense of empowerment from what they were doing. So what you're doing can be moved to another level.
Definitely.
Very successfully.
Thank you.
So we had something of a sanctioning camp, well, we had two, and I think our county, I'm in Santa Rosa, Sonoma County, California, and I feel like our community is a little like burned by the two experiences. One of them was RVs, and so a small nonprofit got some funding, got a small property. They had this great idea and plan of a steward program for them to manage themselves, and it turned really chaotic. I think 4 or 5 people committed suicide, and and people didn't want to leave. They were told and in agreement in the beginning that they would work and live in this place temporarily, but ultimately they needed to go to another place, and many of them refused to do so. And now those same RVs, several years later, are back out on the streets where they came from. And the other one was an actual sanctioned encampment. Our county used ERF funds and on our county property, but the provider that they hired ended up being caught embezzling a lot of that money. And the people who were there, and I went into that place and I was doing my drumming and meditations with people, but I started to hear they were treating them like prisoners. It was really an awful way that they were being managed. And so I started giving out grievance forms, and I was banned. They said, you can't come here anymore, you're doing sneaky stuff, whatever. So I guess my question is, I'm wondering if instead of inside out and trying to push my community to try it again, to bring you or more models and to just say, there's more you can do. Maybe you didn't have enough structure at the time, but can you come talk to our council?
I'd love to.
That's great.
Yeah, and it does matter that you have some people that are coming from a place of stability and not being in the thick of crisis in the moment. Because Because when it comes down to it, you're living in a chaotic situation. It's not, you know, we have porta potties, we have tents, we don't have walls in the same way, and plumbing and supports. And there are a lot of people with a lot of needs. And so to put all that pressure on the residents to manage everything is too much. Just like there are some sites where you could right off the bat start doing security from your own team of who's there, depending on the perimeter, if it's easy to control with a fence or whatnot. But at this site, we needed to get outside security because there were some really challenging people that are no longer there, but were very much threatening others. And if you had put that all on Paul and some of the other residents to manage, that would have been unfair.
Yeah,
Because they're just trying to
yeah.
figure out life, like, and on top of it, to have to police other people. So you can't put too much responsibility on people unless they're in that more stable place,
Yeah.
which, to your point, I
Yeah.
think, yeah, let's exchange information.
So it's time,
It is
the
time,
section is getting
everyone.
ready.
Thank you very
Quick
much
session.
for coming out. Appreciate it.